Shradaya Krishna Sabdale Shivati Bhakti Suni Devi Dasi. Today we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 9, Chapter 18, King Yayati Regains His Youth, Text 23. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Yayatir Anabi Pritam Daivo Paritam Atmaha Manas Tu Tadgatam Budva Pratijagraha Tadvachaha Yatir Anya Bipretam Daivo Paritam Atmanaha Manastu Tadgatam Bhutva Pratijagraha Tadvachaha Yatir Anya Bipretam Daivo Paritam Atmanaha Manastu Tadgatam Budva Pratijagraha Tadvachaha. Please chant. Daivo Paritam Atmanaha Manastu Tadgatam Budva Pratijagraha Tadvachaha Gadam Devam Paritam Atmanaha Ladies, Daiva Paritam Atmanaha Manastu Tadgatam Budva Pratijagraha Tadvachaha. Great. Paritam Atmanaha Manastu Tadgatam Budva Yayati, King Yayati, Anabi Pritam, not liked, Daiva Uparitam, brought about by providential arrangements. Atmanaha, his personal interest. Mana, mind. Tu, however. Tat gatam, being attracted to her. Budva, by such intelligence. Pratijagraha, accepted. Tat vachaha, the words of Devayani. Translation. Sukadeva Goswami continued, because such a marriage is not sanctioned by regular scriptures, King Yayati did not like it, But because it was arranged by Providence, and because he was attracted by Devayani's beauty, he accepted her request. Please repeat. Sukadeva Goswami continued. Because such a marriage is not sanctioned by regular scriptures, King Yayati did not like it. But because it was arranged by Providence, and because he was attracted by Devayani's beauty, he accepted her request. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. According to the Vedic system, the parents would consider the horoscopes of the boy and girl who were to be married. If, according to astrological calculations, the boy and girl were compatible in every respect, the match was called yaktoka, and the marriage would be accepted. Even 50 years ago, this system was current in Hindu society. Regardless of the affluence of the boy or the personal beauty of the girl, without this astrological compatibility, the marriage would not take place. A person is born in one of three categories, known as Devagana, Manushya-gana, and Rakshasa-gana. In different parts of the universe, there are demigods and demons. And in human society also, some people resemble demigods, whereas others resemble demons. If, according to astrological calculations, there was conflict between a godly and a demoniac nature, the marriage would not take place. Similarly, there were calculations of pratiloma and anuloma. The central idea is that if the boy and girl were on an equal level, the marriage would be happy, whereas inequality would lead to unhappiness. Because care is no longer taken in marriage, we now find many divorces. Indeed, divorce has now become a common affair. Although formerly one's marriage would continue lifelong, and the affection between husband and wife was so great that the wife would voluntarily die when her husband died, or would remain a faithful widow throughout her entire life. Now, of course, this is no longer possible, for human society has fallen to the level of animal society. Marriage now takes place simply by agreement. Dampatye Biruchir Hetu, from the Bhagavatam 12:2-3. The word abhiruchi means agreement. If the boy and girl simply agree to marry, the marriage takes place. But when the Vedic system is not rigidly observed, marriage frequently ends in divorce. The verse again is, Sukadeva Goswami continued, because such a marriage is not sanctioned by regular scriptures, King Yayati did not like it. But because it was arranged by Providence and because he was attracted by Devayani's beauty, he accepted her request. Nama Om Vishnaya Krishna Vistaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Savaniti Namani Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pachari Nirvashesha Sanivadi Pasachadi Starni. So before we start, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Maha Devi Dasi, and I joined the movement in 1971, got initiated that summer, and came to India the first time in 1975, and I feel like I'm one of Prabhupada's miracles. Actually, you all are Prabhupada's miracle. But in particular, the Gaur-Purnima Festival of 1975 was attended by about 400 devotees. There had been an international festival the year before. It wasn't as well attended. So, but I would say that 74 was the first major festival. So I came to the second major Gaur-Purnima Festival, and that was the one that we started here in Mayapur. About 150 devotees went down to Hyderabad. Prabhupada flew down to Hyderabad. There was a Pandal program there, and you might have heard how one time a man was challenging Prabhupada and saying, show me a miracle. This was in Hyderabad that year. And the 150 of us were all sitting on the platform with Prabhupada, and Prabhupada answered him by saying, "This is my miracle," and he motioned to all of us. We had become from hippies to happies, Prabhupada would say. So I was very proud to be one of his miracles. I'm saying that we all are. So what about my book? Okay, because Sikhi Mahiti is I brought a copy. I wrote my memories of Srila Prabhupada. If anybody would like to read them, it's not a new book, but they haven't gotten outdated. And yeah, Srila Prabhupada is coming, is what we always said. From the moment I joined the temple, devotees were saying, Srila Prabhupada is coming. Prabhupada was here in India when I joined, and everyone was saying, Prabhupada's coming very soon. And once I understood I wanted to get initiated, I was hoping that he wouldn't come right away. So that would be 6 months requirement, to get initiated, and it worked out perfectly. So Prabhupada's purport here, he doesn't speak about divorce in the Bhagavatam very much. But I certainly remember there was a point, I don't remember what year it was, but there was a point that Prabhupada was actually so disgusted with his disciples getting divorced that he kind of banned marriage for a while. And it did change how people were getting, marriage was still going on, but at least they had a trial first to see if it was going to work out. But what Prabhupada is emphasizing in his purport is that marriage should be arranged by the parents and in accord with the horoscope. That the horoscope will tell, what's a favorable arrangement. And he's really putting down in this purport, and I have some other quotes, where he's saying that marriage by arrangement is not going to work, basically. It's not really acceptable. Actually, my notes are a little disorganized. I'm used to having a printer. I had to handwrite everything. But okay, here's a really great quote from the 9th Canto, 20th chapter. Prabhupada says, although marriage by personal selection or by agreement took place in the past, we find no such thing as divorce by a disagreement. I never heard that phrase before, divorce by disagreement. Because there are many types of divorce, many types of marriage. And Prabhupada says there's 8 different kinds of marriage, but I couldn't find all 8. But one of them is by agreement that is accepted in the Vedic culture. And that is when the girl selects her own husband. And that's, usually it's like an open competition situation. So the examples he gave are Sita Devi, she chose, there was conditions, of course, but still she chose, and also Draupadi. And there's other examples. Does anybody give me other examples we find in the Bhagavatam? Rukmini, yes, thank you. Any others we can think of right now? So anyway, there are other examples, and so by agreement is acceptable. It's called a Gandharva marriage. So it's arranged by personal selection, not by the parents. What we find today, though, is arrangements by, I like this person. And that's not enough, really. So there's things we can do to raise the bar in our society. This is a real problem. Yesterday, the devotee who gave class, I'm glad he didn't give a statistic because I'm a statistic person. I compile the Srila Prabhupada disciple database, and anybody who ever, tries to give a statistic that's not based on reality, I will object to it. So I've heard people throw around, divorce is 50% of our society. Well, I want to say, no one's ever done any calculations. There are no statistics. We don't know. So I just request people to not give a number, but what we do know is it's way too prevalent. I did try to find some statistics online. What I found was that there are many countries that are 50% divorce, and more. That means that out of 100 marriages, 50% are not going to make it. So India has a very, very low rate of divorce. Like, I think it's definitely one of the very lowest, like 1%. So that's really, really good. Now, when you look at statistics by religion, which I looked up, Hinduism also has an extremely low rate. However, I mean, we can assume that the Hare Krishna movement is grouped under that category because it's not, in the statistics. But, I don't really know how this, statisticians, where they put us, if anywhere at all. So we could say that in India, the devotees have a low rate of divorce, and in Western countries, they don't. Would that be fair to say? Does that seem like that's what's going on in these days? See, we don't know. We haven't done statistics. All we know is that Prabhupada did not approve of divorce. So let me see if I can find some other quotes. So in the 4th canto, 23rd chapter, 25th verse in the purport, Prabhupada wrote, "We should understand the necessity for maintaining family life in human society and should abolish this artificial law known as divorce. Husband and wife should live in Krishna consciousness and follow in footsteps of Lakshmi Narayan or Krishna Rukmini. In this way, peace and harmony can be possible within this world." So that was an encouraging view of, we could live peacefully. So Prabhupada was giving a lecture in Los Angeles in 1974, and it was about the 12th canto. It was on the verses at the beginning of the 2nd chapter of the 12th canto. So, Prabhupada never got to translate the 12th canto, but he lectured on it. And this same word that's in the verse, abhiruchi, which Prabhupada, in this verse, he translates it one way, which is in the purport, he quoted Dampatye Biruchir Hetu. So then he said the word abhiruchi means agreement. However, in this lecture, he says the relationship between husband and wife will depend on abhiruchi. They're liking each other. And then what's also interesting is then when Prabhupada's disciples wrote the purports to the 12th canto, they translated it as superficial liking. Wait, Mike. Superficial attraction. They said superficial attraction. So going back to that first quote, if there's superficial attraction, there can also be, dislike as well. Can go from one to the other easily. So in that lecture, Prabhupada spoke, the relationship between husband and wife will depend on abhiruchi. They're liking each other. Divorce comes because marriage took place simply on basis of superficial liking, not deep understanding. And then he was talking about how his parents arranged his marriage and other arranged marriages. And then he said, formerly in India, marriage took place only after astrological calculations of past, present, and future had determined whether the couple would be happy in this life together. When marriage is thus sanctified, The man and woman live peacefully and practice spiritual culture. Each one helps each other. That's a key clue to marriage working. They help each other. So they live very happily, become advanced in spiritual life, and then at last they go back to God, back to home, back to Godhead. That is the system. So that is our goal, as we all know, to go back to Godhead. So Prabhupada he's showing us a path. I know that about 95% of the human population get married. I tried to confirm that number. I did come across like 96% of people in America who are in their 70s and 80s have been married. But, that's an old statistic that I remember from years ago, 95%. So if we look at our society, I don't want to criticize the Brahmachari ashram. I really don't. It's just that the Brahmachari ashram in Mayapur is very large, very, very large. And it just seems that if 95% of people get married, that maybe maybe there needs to be some reality checks with the brahmacharis. The problem that I see, okay, I'm speaking now. Okay, let me go back a little second. I'm from America, and the Native Americans, who have commonly been called American Indians, nothing to do with India, but the Native Americans had tribes, and the older women beyond their childbearing years, would be called the wise women. And they would choose the leaders. Like when the chief was getting old, or if he died, it wasn't the men who got together and chose the new leader. It was the women. Why? Because the women had watched the children grow up over the years, and they knew who was an actual leader. It wasn't about power and money, which we see today, where the main reasons people are leaders. It was actually leadership qualities. So I'm just speaking as an old woman, what they called wise women, that the brahmacharis are not falling down when they get married. Okay, this is. I'm sorry to say, it's only in Mayapur I've ever heard this, and since I've been living in Mayapur on and off since 1975, because I did stay in Mayapur after the Gaur Purnim festival of '75. I lived in Mayapur. Well, in India for 2.5 years, and most of it was in Mayapur, and then I've spent another 7 years in the 90s, and now I come every year for 2 or 3 months, and that's been going on for a few decades. So I know what goes on in Mayapur, even though I have really nothing to do with the Brahmachari ashram, and I just object to the Grihastha ashram being considered a fall down, because Prabhupada called his Grihastha disciples Grihastha brahmacharis. And in the progression of the ashrams, it is a higher ashram, and you're taking responsibility. So I don't think there's any philosophical basis for thinking that it is a fall down to be Grihastha. Okay, I'm also saying that from having been married for 37 years to my late husband. Maybe some of you remember him, Gyanagamya Prabhu, who left his body here in Mayapur about 4 years ago. So 37 years of marriage, you get a little understanding. And I just so understand what Prabhupada is saying when he says that the couple, husband and wife, help each other. It's, and even though my marriage, honestly, was not arranged, but yet it worked somehow. And in the purport where Prabhupada was saying about how in the Vedic culture, the husband and wife had such affection for each other that the wife was ready to die when, and did this did happen, that the wife would die with the husband. She'd climb on the funeral pyre, or she would remain a widow the rest of her life. And I understand that. I understand that. Like, after my husband left, it was like, it didn't make sense to even have a partnership, and then one is gone. So, and yet people were thinking that, oh, he was living here in Mayapur and I was in America. We were very detached. No, we weren't really. I mean, my husband was. He honestly practiced detachment before he left. He, consciously chose to become detached. So he kind of was keeping me away, although I did get here one day before he left. So, but it was more like, we don't really know what Vanaprastha is like in ISKCON. We haven't really established it as an ashram, but I feel like we were kind of unknowingly practicing it. Like, I was staying in America, and I would come to India when I could, which is always the same time of year, and my husband was living here. But anyway, this is something that ISKCON could look at, like looking at what does it look like in the modern age to be Vanaprastha. Because according to the Bhagavatam, husband and wife are supposed to travel together to the holy places and preach. We don't see that happening so much. I mean, we do see some examples of Vanaprastha, but it's not really been defined. So I just have to look at my list of... Okay, before Gurpurnim this year, Urmila Devi Dasi gave class, and she was very strong about grihastas having many children in order to spread our movement. And this is the way it's going on in the world. Like, the Islam religion is increasing simply on the basis of them having children, not, converting people to the religion. So we could follow that example. We could encourage the grihastas, and should encourage the grihastas, to have as many children as possible and raise them to be wonderful devotees. I mean, what better devotees than from birth, right? So the day after Urmila gave class, then Vijaya Prabhu, who's a big book distributor, been brahmachari for decades and decades, he was he gave a wonderful class, except at the beginning of his class, he said he really tried to undo Urmila's encouragement. And he was saying, like, he's been distributing books for decades, and on the basis of being brahmachari, that's great. But you know what? It does not mean that grihastas can't distribute books too. I come from Alachua, Florida, and we have one grihasta couple. They're fully supporting themselves on book distribution. And it's not that he's just trying to make money, to support himself. We're also thrilled that he's distributing books, and we're not, as much as he is. So the grihastas, we give him the books to distribute. And actually, just recently, last time I gave class in Alachua, this devotee's name is Divyanga, by the way, and he's a wonderful example. And he raised his hand at the end of my class, and he said, "Did you know that your husband used to give me money for buying books?" And he would say, "Don't tell my wife." I had no idea, So we would regularly give him like hundreds of dollars at a time to buy books. The thing is, the last year during the Gurpurnim festival, Shiva Ram Swami gave a class. And when he looked over towards the women's side and he saw me, he said, "Maha, I was just reading a letter that Srila Prabhupada wrote to you." And because he said, I was researching where Prabhupada was saying his disciples are going back to Godhead. Back to home, back to Godhead. So then he quoted this letter that Prabhupada wrote to me. This was when I got initiated. We were supposed to give to Guru Dakshin, but I didn't give it to Prabhupada directly. It was like months later. So I wrote a letter about, how I'd given the Dakshin. I can't remember exactly. I gave it to the ISKCON treasurer, as I was told to do. So Prabhupada wrote me back, and in that letter, he wrote, okay, I don't have it marked which page. This is from memory. He said, distribute my books and literatures as many as possible, and know it for certain that very soon you will go back to home, back to Godhead. Yeah. So when Maharaj quoted that letter, I was like, I felt like I had totally forgotten. At the time, I was typesetting Prabhupada's books. I was composing Prabhupada's books. I felt very connected to the books, although I wasn't the one distributing them. But that was years ago, and I'm not doing anything now. So when I went back to Alatra after last year's Gaur Purnim, I made a commitment to give Divyanga $100 every month for books. So I feel less guilty, right? Anyway, Hare Krishna. I think okay, no, I found it. All right, so, okay, I wanted to bring up the example of Chopadi Temple. They don't let the men move into the brahmachari ashram until they complete their degrees and work for 1 year, so that they're prepared to be a grihastha when that time comes. I mean, like I said, if 95% of the people get married, it's inevitable that most of those brahmacharis are eventually going to get married, and then they have a basis of getting a job to support themselves and their family. And I wanted to make a couple of suggestions about Mayapur, like to develop business opportunities so that there is a man entering the Grihastha ashram can see that he can make money and support his wife. And this is something that we talked about back in the 1990s. And I don't know if there's like a coalition of successful businessmen who are talking about this, but if there isn't, there should be. I'm just suggesting that that Mayapur devotees get together and develop cottage industries or develop some other ways for grihastas to be able to function independently of the temple. Because I think this may be one of the factors that make men hesitate to get married. They don't know how they're going to support their family. So I am most comfortable telling stories about Srila Prabhupada, so I wanted to share one. And since yesterday was our Sridhar Maharaj's disappearance day, and I didn't get a chance to share my memory of him, so I wanted to share about how I went to Ahmedabad. Actually, I flew on this same airplane as Srila Prabhupada, and that's a whole story in itself. But when we arrived at the airport, Srila Prabhupada was the first one off the plane. They didn't have assigned seats in those days somehow. So Prabhupada was sitting right by the door. He was the first one off. And somehow the devotees from Bombay, there's no temple yet in Ahmedabad, the devotees from Bombay had come to put on a Pandal program for Prabhupada, and they all actually came right on the tarmac, right up to the plane. And and surrounded Prabhupada and kind of went off with him. But I was sitting 7 seats back, so it was a while before I got off the plane. And I also had to get my luggage. So somehow it was arranged that one man would drive me to where the women were staying at somebody's house. Unfortunately, this man didn't really know where that was. So we were kind of driving around the city for a while, and he finally says, I don't know how to find this place. So let's just go where they took Prabhupada. I'm like, fine, no problem. So we went to a man's house. His name was Bogilal Patel. He's a very rich man. In the middle of the city, he had such a large estate that we entered through a gate into like what was like a forest. I mean, it was just, we drove for a while through, trees and grass, and it was like the governor's house or something. Finally get to the front of the house. There was this huge fountain and a circular driveway, and we went inside, and they had put white sheets all over the carpets in their entrance room. It was like this double marble stairway going up. It was an exquisite house. And some of the family members are there to greet us, and they said, Srila Prabhupada's in the library. So I put my luggage down just outside the door of the library, and I went into the library, and it was a real library, like with books lining the wall. I mean, it wasn't that big a room, but anyway, Prabhupada was sitting behind this huge desk, and the Bombay devotees are all sitting there, and Mr. Patel's, some of his family members, there was a lot of, maybe friends of the family as well. There was a lot of young men. So at one point, Prabhupada was asking for a Bhagavad Gita. He wanted to look up a verse. Well, the devotees had gotten there on this flat-back truck. They weren't prepared with the Bhagavad Gita. But I knew I had a Bhagavad Gita in my bag, and I did not want to bring it out because when traveling to India, I had stopped in London. Devotees there convinced me I had way too much luggage. I should leave my books there and replace them in India. So I agreed to do that. Got to Vrindavan and asked to buy a new Bhagavad Gita. So they took my money for a new Bhagavad Gita. However, the temple president said, okay, now go to the temple library and take one of the Gitas. So I go to the library, and every one of them was marked on the side, temple copy number, and the one I got was number 4. So that's what my Bhagavad Gita was. And I didn't want to bring it in because it looked like I stole it, But I did. I went and got it. I mean, Prabhupada wanted it, right? So that was a higher principle. I got the Gita, handed it to somebody who read the verse to Prabhupada. He never said anything about how, huge letters. It said temple copy number 4. Okay, then Prabhupada was, like most of my stories, I'm sorry to say, are about embarrassing moments. And that was one of them, So what I do remember that was positive, that Prabhupada was asking the young men who were there, like, what are they doing? So you know what? I had those papers marking the very place, and now... Okay, I'll just have to... my memory. So Prabhupada said, so what are you doing? And they said, we are in school, we are studying technology. He said, why are you studying technology? They have already perfected technology in the West. And he gave the example of Germany. And he started Swami. Anyway, they were probably the ones who were adding to Prabhupada's list. So then he turns to the young men and he said, I want 100 young men to join the Hare Krishna movement. 100 young men from Ahmedabad to join the Hare Krishna movement. I don't think any joined on the spot, but I think in the years since, probably that's happened. So the main memory I have of Sridhar Swami at that time was that when we had the Pandal program, Prabhupada would come on the stage. He would, you know, we were there before Prabhupada got there. We were doing kirtan, and Prabhupada would come. He would give a lecture. He would also have kirtan, and then he would leave, and the Western devotees would stay there, and Achyutananda and Sridhar Prabhus would be the main ones on the stage. And this is what they would say. They would say, we want you to contribute to the Hare Krishna movement. We don't need your money. We are sons of rich men. We don't need your money. You need to give for your own purification, for your own benefit. That's why you should give to help spread the Krishna consciousness movement. And that was their main way they would preach. And they would do a whole thing with a framed picture of deities, and if they gave enough money, they would get the framed picture, and you know, they would kind of make it almost similar to an auction, kind of. And when all the men had given, then they would say to us, okay, go get the paisa from the ladies. Because they never had any money, right? They would have paisa wrapped up in their sari. And you know, he would send us, for some reason, the ladies, we were the one going around collecting these donations. We were so sick, this program was so successful that Prabhupada was scheduled to be there for 5 days. And he had to go. He was scheduled to go to Mauritius. So he had to leave. But he said, you should all stay here and continue this. They couldn't keep the same venue. It was already booked. So they had to change venues. I don't know how they advertised, but people found out, and it continued in some other venue. And we did it for like another 3 days. It was amazing. So, and that was before there was a temple in Ahmedabad, but shortly thereafter, they established a temple. So I think I've run out of time for my talk, and I would open it up to questions or corrections or comments or whatever you would like to contribute. Sikhi Mahidi Prabhu.
So I think we can say I don't think you can find really good astrologers anymore.
Maybe not.
Because even in our society, you meet devotees, you get their chart, it's called, oh, it's such a wonderful, wonderful divorce. And you see ones that don't get married. They stay here. So, you know, Kali Yuga is going to just have to, can you do the best you can. I wrote a book about that, right? How to ruin your life with astrology.
Devotee wrote that book?
Yeah. It's not that big book, but a small, maybe an article you could say. Yeah, it could go both ways. Because what I think is also Krishna sometimes. Well, anyway, I won't get still, people think the astrologers are so expert. Risham Sundar, being an astrologer, he had an accident. People are like, why didn't you see your accident? You're an astrologer.
Okay. Okay, there are some good astrologers, and you know, he also told me I'd never have any children, and I have a son, so. He goes, oh, that was early. I hadn't really learned it well enough. Anyway, there are some good astrologers, I think. Although, didn't Prabhupada say there was no good astrologers since Bhakti Siddhanta?
Yeah, it's a quote, but he said he was a great astrologer, and he never used it. So we just depend on Krishna.
Okay, but in this purport, and in a few other places, he has emphasized that. Of course.
I'm not disagreeing. I just threw that out there.
Okay. Yes, Mataji.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
That this book that Prabhu was mentioning, was written by Mataji. She's an astrologer. She's really good. This book is also really good.
Okay.
This book says how people misuse astrology. It's nice.
Okay. So it can be misused or it can be taught. Right?
Srila Govinda wrote it.
Radha Govinda wrote it.
Yeah, she's a good astrologer. Yes.
I think she's going to class next week. You can talk to her about that. Hare Krishna. Yeah. Jandanandana. Pass the mic. Oh, okay. Yes. Is it on?
A lot of times, we all have a kind of common understanding that the purpose in this God is to follow this tradition. The whole organization is all. He's the founder of Acharya, the whole organization is based on that. But there's so many, I don't want to use the word, but though we have so many instructions, it's seem, one thing, like we say, Prabhupada said, you don't need astrology, just depend on Krishna. And then you're reading out the book, you must have astrology or you won't have a good marriage. I met Srila Prabhupada in Atlanta in 1975. I was on the Damodar party, and we came in to meet Srila Prabhupada.
Oh.
I think your husband might have been there. You might have been there. I'm not sure. But I do know that those of us that were there, each one of us is introduced to Srila Prabhupada as Maha one after the other. We all got I came in and put a flower on his desk. Goswami said, this is Michael. He's going to party at a young age. And Prabhupada looked at me and said, oh, very good. And we all sat down and Srila Prabhupada explained to us about how happy he was that we were distributing his books. He told us that you have a very good leader with Tamal Krishna Goswami. If you follow him, then I'm pleased. And he said, it's best if you can stay Brahmachari. He said that his spiritual master went directly from Brahmachari to sannyasa ashram and saved himself a lot of trouble. He said that household life is, family life is compared to a hole in which people have school and can't get out, that they fall into, they can't get out. He said they shouldn't have many children because that's what animals do. So it seemed like, so when later on, when most of us got married, Yeah, we had this sort of a kind of guilt, that came along with it. The Maha Prabhupada asked us to stay brahmachari, and here we are going to get married. So how can we balance that with wanting to have a good, strong, full enthusiasm for the project, at the same time trying to deal with the fact that he said that
I totally understand it because I heard so many lectures for so many years, which was encouraging to the brahmacharis. Because I felt that the brahmacharis need to hear this, or they're not going to stay brahmachari. At the same time, being in a woman's body, all women are supposed to get married. So you had to hear that with the grain of salt, in the sense that the lecture is to encourage brahmacharis to stay brahmachari, and yet knowing, like I say, 95% of people are going to get married. So, okay, I've got two people in the back waving their hands. So, and since Siki Mahiti was there,
Yeah, in
at that time,
74 in Chicago.
were you? No,
There
you
was
weren't
a
in
letter.
Atlanta.
I didn't go to Atlanta, but
Yeah,
there was
you
a
weren't.
letter written about this
Oh.
because in Sri Govinda,
Yes.
he was also the same point. He was at a Bhagavatam class and he was preaching about it doesn't matter whether you're a household or a brahmachari, the ladies should need protection. So you all are going to get married. You have no choice. The president had power at that time. Real heavy, yeah. That's it. I don't care what you say. You're going to get married. Enough of this. So they wrote Prabhupada a letter, and he replied, yes, this is one of the great contradictions in our philosophy. All men should be brahmachari, and all women should be married. But not by force. That's it. Didn't say anything else. Not by force. We just left it at that.
Okay. You want to pass the mic to Jennifer?
Thank you, Mahamaya, for a thought-provoking and inspiring class. I think you covered this point in the class, actually, where you said Prabhupada informed us or taught us that the householders that are actually following grihastha dharma are householder brahmacharis.
Right.
That's not a contradiction. So one statement of Srimad Bhagavatam that really has so much application or so much validity. Krishna consciousness is a matter of common sense. So if you have brahmachari karma, I think I can say that, or the firm determination in the body card to remain brahmachari, for heaven's sakes, we don't want to discourage you.
Right. Yeah.
But most people don't. It would be nice if the leaders, like you quoted Chowpatty, can support and educate, facilitate the transition from one ashram to the other. So it's nice where there are examples of that, and more can be done for sure. One statement, back to the astrology part. There's a purport in Srimad Bhagavatam where Prabhupada says, misuse of the science does not make a science useless. It's a nice reminder. And it applies to either somebody's good at science or they're not. And if something's favorable with Krishna consciousness, then of course we embrace it. That's another common sense kind of thing. Marriage is such samskar in life for those who are entering it. Why would you not take the help as soon? I need to see whether or not this will be favorable. Joining together in the couple service to Krishna.
Yeah.
So anyway,
Thank you.
in conclusion, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, actually, just to add that at least we should get premarital counseling for couples. That should really be a requirement. I think that the Grihastha Vision, there's several couples that form a group called the Grihastha Vision. Partha and Uttama are a couple who say they've never had a fight, and they've been married like 40-some years. Like seriously, they've never had a fight. So they're like one of the heads of the Grihastha Vision, and they've been emphasizing like the necessity for premarital counseling. I mean, if you have some irreconcilable disagreement, like maybe the wife wants a child and the husband doesn't. I mean, how are you going to resolve that? Better to like get that clear before, and other things too. But that's one of the big ones, you know. If there's like complete disagreement, then don't go forward, you know. But astrology is also, I mean, you know, Prabhupada is mentioning a lot in this purport, and yeah, oh, you have the mic. Oh, yes. Please.
Hare Krishna. I want to ask one question, but first I want to tell a little story. In Chowpatty recently, one of their big brahmacharis went preaching in New York. He met this beautiful Western girl. He got married. And in Chowpatty, they had to fast from Paniya for 3 months or 12 months as a, you know, what's the word? You know, so
You're saying that was considered a fall down, and that all.
that's why I'm just putting it in the mix.
Okay.
It's only Mayapur that. Okay, so you can comment on that later. Can I ask you one question now?
Sure.
So someone asked me to answer this question. In the Vedic culture, the higher caste man, he can marry a woman from a lower caste, but generally a high caste woman cannot marry from a lower caste. Why is that?
I know that it's been coming up in these verses, and honestly, yeah. Yeah, okay, that's true. If, the purport, well, it just Prabhupada defined it earlier in this chapter. He actually was verse 5, I think. Yeah, he says, according to the Vedic system, marriages between Kshatriyas and Kshatriyas, or between Brahmins and Brahmins, are the general custom. If marriages sometimes take place in different classes, these marriages are of two types, namely Anuloma and Pratiloma. Anuloma marriage between a Brahmin and the daughter of a Kshatriya is permissible, but Pratiloma, that's the case in this story, marriage between a Kshatriya and the daughter of a Brahmana is not generally allowed. I mean, is that the answer? A complete enough answer for you?
May I?
Yes, please.
First point about the brahmachari in New York.
Yeah.
The question to be asked would be, did he ask his spiritual master if he could change ashram? With the high standard of training in Chowpatty, if he did not, I think in and of itself, just that is a fall down from the
Okay.
dharma that he should be aware of or following.
Right.
And two, in regards to the higher class
interests of the two. And if the woman is more qualified than the man, male ego, and that's the reason why women subordinate themselves, because the male ego has the Purusha Bhav. I mean, it's all mixed up in Kali Yuga, but ideally in Vedic culture, it makes it a little difficult for a man who's thinking, I'm the controller, I'm the big cheese here, having a woman who's more qualified and has better thoughts or advice or this or that. So I think that is the understanding why it would be higher class or even.
Thank you. Definitely, thank you. Okay, it's 9 o'clock, but one more question, Atita Guna. Can you pass the mic to her?
I study a little bit of astrology, and many people come to me and ask about compatibility. So some people just don't have very good marriage karma, but when I'm looking at the compatibility, what it is what are their natures? Now, the natures have to be very similar in order to get along. Otherwise, you've got 2 years and then there's an explosion. And the attractiveness that you see and that you had seen in the other person just explodes. What you liked before becomes very annoying. So it is a very, very good idea to try and get compatibility done. You can see by somebody's chart what their intentions are, that sort of thing. Maybe it's a man just wants to take advantage of a, innocent lady or something like that. And in 1976, when Srila Prabhupada came to Melbourne, Australia, 10% of the devotees were householders. And Srila Prabhupada said, no, in a few years it'll be changed. 90% will be householders and 10% will be brahmacharis. And sure enough, we're like, no, that won't happen. But sure enough, it did. Yeah. Haribol.
All right, thank you. Thank you all very much. Hare Krishna.